Talk him down? Why would I want to talk him down? And if I was pissed off, I wouldn't let nobody talk me down. The saying goes, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
If you were to take a picture of the Mr. Olympia from every decade during the history of bodybuilding, you'd definitely notice that something started to change around the late 70s, early 80s. Gone were the natural beasts like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was really the largest man to ever win that competition, and it really just came down to a combination of who has the best genes versus who works the hardest. All that changed with the advent of anabolic steroids, and then again with human growth hormone as we reached the new millennium, even though it had been around for a while. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the worst examples of bodybuilders with distended guts. Number 6, Scott Steiner. Now we know what you're thinking, Scott Steiner isn't a bodybuilder, he's a wrestler. Well, considering he shows up in a lot of bodybuilding videos and was once known as one of the most built men on the planet, he seemed like a good fit. On top of that, he actually has something more than just pure bubble gut-itis going on, and he also has a gigantic separation in the middle of his chest that is becoming more and more apparent as he ages. It's been discussed ad nauseam online, and people can't really seem to figure out exactly what's going on with his entire torso. But it's apparent that he's at least aware of it, as he's gotten a gigantic tattoo to cover up the middle of his chest, and often wears something to cover up his bubble gut. Either way, if the sheer amount of premature passings don't scare you off of things like anabolic steroids and/or human growth hormone, then results like those people like Steiner have definitely should. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about actual bodybuilders.
Oh, dumbbell girls, you know what they say? Girls for the girls.
Number 5, Phil Heath. Phil Heath is the only member of today's list that is under the age of 40. At 42 years old, he's an extremely well-known bodybuilder and is the most successful this century, winning 7 straight Mr. Olympia competitions, the Super Bowl of bodybuilding, from 2011 through 2017. Despite that though, as he's gotten older, he's definitely developed a case of the bubble guts. It's actually his appearance, along with that of this competition, that really poured gas on the fire that has been bubble guts in the sport over the last few years. Numerous pictures of the final contestants were labeled as horrible, and even the Mr. Pregnant show, forcing the legends of all legends in the game that is bodybuilding, Arnold Schwarzenegger, to comment on the state of bubble guts in the industry. Arnold stated that perhaps there needs to be a change in how the contests are scored to penalize the lack of aesthetics in the sport. The sport used to be all about the V-shaped body, and now the sport really only cares about bulk and mass. While Arnold admits that even he had to suck in his stomach from time to time, things have definitely gotten out of control, and this most recent Mr. Olympia is a testament to that fact. Number 4, JeanPierre Fuchs. Outside of his hilarious last name, Pierre Fuchs, which we bet he does, is mostly known for a terrible accident that occurred during a weightlifting session and almost ended his career. He was attempting to squat almost 700 pounds while at Gold's Gym in Fullerton, California. While initially lifting the amount during a photo shoot for Flex magazine, he suddenly collapsed with the full weight on his back. He describes the accident as following: "We worked up to 7 plates on each side. That weight is not a problem for me. I had done the same thing a week earlier for my training video. I began to squat down and everything was fine. Then in a split second I went from complete comfort to collapse. My knees just went. I crashed down so quickly the spotters didn't have time to react. Afterward they felt bad about it, but it was so quick nobody could have caught the weight." Luckily he was prepared for such an accident and knew that if he wanted to save the tendons in his knees' legs, he should keep his legs straight. So once the weight was removed, he straightened his legs, and that most likely saved his tendons. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital and was wheelchair bound for a long time, which is perhaps the source of his bubble gut or the drugs he took to catch up after his injury. His injury is so well known because he urged both the magazine Flex and the photographer who took the pictures to actually publish them to help people know what to do when they're injured, which is super cool and makes you hope that he can now conquer his biggest test of all, the bubble gut.
My weight is a little bit less than in the last competition. The last competition my weight was 123. Maybe I can make a surprise in this Olympia show. Diet is the same than in the last years. Different is my motivation.
Number 3, Kai Greene. Phil Heath's most consistent competition has been Kai Greene, who has finished second at the 2012, 13, and 14 Mr. Olympias behind Heath. He also won the 2016 Arnold Classic. That should at least punish someone like Greene for having a bottle shape as opposed to the classic V shape Arnold, everyone with eyeballs, prefers. Greene has a tough background, growing up in the foster care system and residential treatment centers. Because of that, he acted out, and luckily for him, his science teacher noticed that he had behavioral problems and also a genetic gift, so he helped him pursue bodybuilding to take advantage of those gifts while giving him a place to vent, funnel all of his anger and emotion. What's so sad about this current trend is you hear these amazing stories about how bodybuilding can save a life like Greene's, but at the same time, all of that work is essentially going down the drain because it appears that bubble guts are permanent. Just ask Big Lenny. And there's really nothing that these guys can do, and thus their careers will be over. Now granted, a lot of them are fairly old, and Greene, in his late 40s, is at the tail end of his career, but still, you'd hate to see an entire generation of bodybuilders wasted because drugs were taken too far. Number 2. Ronnie Coleman. If Phil Heath is the most successful bodybuilder of this decade, then Ronnie Coleman was the most successful bodybuilder of the 90s. He won 8 Mr. Olympias in a row, and also holds the record for the most IFBB professional wins at a staggering 26. He is now retired, so you can't expect him to be in peak shape, but it is sad to see someone who was as huge as Coleman fall victim to bubble guts himself. This guy is a complete beast and makes a lot of his competition look small by comparison, and that has helped offset the obviousness of his protruding stomach, like a lot of others on this list. But really, if anyone should be the poster boy for whatever caused Palumboism, it should be Coleman. You'll notice that while Arnold did gain a gut in his later years, it was a natural gut made of fat and sagging tissue, not one that appears to be made of pure muscle. So something that these guys were either doing in the late 90s or are doing recently is causing this to either manifest years later when they're around 45 to 50, or their older bodies just can't handle it. There are a ton of theories as to what is causing this problem, and in order to get to the bottom of it before it destroys the sport, more guys like Coleman should come out and discuss it openly. One has to commend Dave Palumbo for discussing this on his YouTube channel and attempting to turn a negative into a positive, so hopefully more people will follow his lead now that Arnold has come out and weighed in on the topic, as it's something that needs to end before next year's Olympia if the sport intends to exist beyond that. Number 1. Marcus Rule. Marcus Rule was a pretty large bodybuilder who was 5 foot 10 inches and around 310 pounds. Even around other bodybuilders, Rule is considered to be a huge guy with gigantic arms and legs that many bodybuilders don't have. A lot of what bodybuilding at least used to be is symmetry and what's aesthetically pleasing. While that's obviously subjective and can change from era to era, a lot of guys don't go for massive bulk, as there are also scores for how lean someone is, how vascular they look, etc. So while that means he may not win every competition because of his pure bulk, Rule has actually weathered the bubble gut era pretty well despite having one himself. His massive arms and legs help cover up the fact that he does have a distended stomach, which really makes him look a lot more like a Ninja Turtles action figure than someone like a He-Man action figure, which one can assume is not what he was going for when he started bodybuilding.
Beat Ronnie because Ronnie is unbeatable, from my opinion. But everybody know I'm the biggest, I'm the muscularist bodybuilder.
That's all for this video, folks. See you another time.